Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Joel Primus. It's great to have you join us today.
It's great to be on the profit. It's great. It feels like I have a profit just being on the show.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you know this dealing with entrepreneurs. It's kind of this like increasingly nebulous term where it's like, what do I do if I'm an entrepreneur? The answer is a lot of things, and that's what I love so much about it. But the main sort of through line of my career since leaving athletics was a company called Naked Underwear, and that was a company that I founded after a running injury and a journey to Peru, and sort of wanted to reinvent men's underwear, and that took me onto Canada's version of Shark Tank, which is called Dragon's Den, where I absolutely got burned. And we could talk about that if you want. But it turned out to be a really good thing. And I ended up raising tens of millions of dollars, uh, moving the company from small cap to the NASDAQ, to divesting the company to a larger company out of Australia. So I ran the full life cycle of, startup to sale, and made every mistake and felt every feeling that entrepreneurs and business owners do on that journey.
And just so I don't know if everyone knows, Dragon's Den is our Shark Tank here in America. Um, what happened on that?
Well, I was called delusional because I had no idea what a profit was, and there's some truth to that. We let's be clear, it is TV, and so the gotcha questions are tough to overcome in that setting. But the reality is that entrepreneurs, they're trying to prove something to themselves and to the world in which they're really the only person who believes this thing is possible, right? Whether it's an underwear line in my case, or somebody's shoe stink remover, whatever it is, when you come up with an idea, you have this deep conviction and belief that God or the universe or whatever has said, you should do this, you should solve this problem. And then you spend the rest of your life trying to convince everybody else to do it. And I was so fixated on this vision that I had for great underwear for men that I didn't know. I hadn't been to business school. My parents didn't have money. We grew up poor. We didn't have investment accounts. And so I didn't really understand financials and all of these things. And as soon as they started peppering me with questions about market size and how I was going to capture what percentage of the market, and how capturing that percentage of the market would equate to this valuation in the business, I mean, I was a deer in the headlights and deserved to be called delusional. However, however, there is an appreciation amongst fellow business people and investors for people who are tenacious and stick with an idea and are willing to learn. And because I went on there, lots of good things fell out of jumping into that fire, that den, if you will. And it's something I really encourage entrepreneurs to do, is to take steps into the discomfort, because I think it can create great energy.
It's funny because that part of the show always comes on. They're always going to ask the financial questions.
No.
And I always tell everyone, right, your business is a math equation.
Mm-hmm.
And the better you know that math equation, and the better that you can prove it with facts, the easier it becomes to sell your story to the Dragon's Den or the Shark Tank. And I'm always kind of, I don't know. I got to figure out how to market to people who are about to go on the show to go, hey, let's just chat, because I'll show you your business math. I'll give you all the scripts. Just go say what I say.
Mm-hmm.
And if you need to, call me out of the audience. And you will not have
Yeah,
trouble with the numbers.
You get it? Is it like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Do you get one free phone call? And we're
One
calling
free
Rocky.
call.
Is that what's happening? It's
You know
true,
what?
though.
We'll do that on the show.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
We'll just say he's in the back.
Yeah.
Or I'll just smile throughout the whole thing until the numbers come up. And then I'll go, hey, this is how we did it. this is what the math looks like. And a lot of times when I do math for business owners, I'm like, I don't believe your math, meaning I don't believe you can do what you say you can do. Show me how that's possible. For example, you talked about market size, right? So somewhere I can Google and get the market size of underwear.
Yeah.
And if you come to me and tell me that I'm going to sell 110% of the market, I'm like, really? You're
Well,
going to take 110% of the market? I don't see how that's possible.
and
But if
that's
you
it's
tell
not.
me,
Sorry, I cut you off,
no,
Rocky.
no, but if you tell me, hey, at a 0.5% of the market, that's $1 billion in sales, I'm like, oh, that's a big market. 0.5%'s doable. Here's how we're going
Mhm.
to achieve it. And then understanding your P&L and what goes into selling that and marketing that and everything else.
Well, that's exactly it. Because the reality is there's this old military saying that no plan of attack survives first contact with the enemy, right? And that's the same with startups, right? You can write the greatest business plan, you could spend 20 grand on some business plan writer, and ultimately, as soon as it's live in the wild, this business that you have, that many of the assumptions you made are not going to come true. And this is why 90% of businesses fail, because success of a business happens in the long tail, and it is based on a company's ability and a founder, and their ability to adjust and modify the strategy as they face these challenges. And to your point and the point of the show, have enough money and cash resources to continually do that. Uh, and most of us don't, right? And I'm the most guilty entrepreneur of any of, like, an addict saying this next hand's going to win the house and being willing to, like, or win it and beat the house, and being willing to roll the dice on that. So it it is all fun and games to say, hey, this is our plan, um, but you have to be ready for that rubber to hit the road. And if, like many people, I mean, I've hit the bottom. I've had companies that I've been with that are insolvent, and I know what that pain and agony feels like, and I know the hindsight of being able to go through the post-mortem and saying, if I had just tweaked some of these things. And I don't mean hindsight is 2020. Those were decisions I could have fixed if I'd been more acutely aware of the numbers and the profits during it.
And one of the things we can do is we can start to predict the future. Now, are we going to be right? No, we're not. And we know that. Are we directionally accurate, close, or are we so far off that we need to reevaluate what we're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And part of that can just, we start looking at it from the beginning, which is interest. How many people are actually interested in your product? So, for example, you put up a Facebook ad for your product and nobody clicks it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we know we have a problem. Nobody's interested. So either you've got the wrong story or you're on the wrong platform or something's wrong. We got to figure it out.
Exactly, right. Like, I've seen that before. Market testing is such a fantastic thing, but this is why software companies, they believe in good is the enemy of good, and great is the enemy of good enough, where it's like, get launched and iterate in real time. This is why you're going to see 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0 software. Hard goods are a little bit harder when you're making a physical product and you're buying inventory to make projections early and then iterate later. But you have to adjust it in real time and very rapidly, and that's how you win in this game, is your ability to adjust and survive to fight another day.
I would tell you not to buy inventory. Get all the orders first, then
Yeah,
buy the
that's
inventory.
that's kicks that's great. That's Kickstarter's model, right? It's a
Yeah.
we've done one, and they, I think that game is changing too a little bit. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, if you can pre-sell as much as you can, if you can partner with your factory and erode some of your profit, if you will, like, let's say you're targeting a 70% go in margin before cost of customer acquisition, which could be around 30%. If you can convince some kind of a manufacturer to say, hey, you take you take extra 10 points on your order. So if it's 10, it's 11 or something like that. But you got to give me 4 months terms. You got to give me a chance to sell through these things so that you're keeping your cash in the till. These are all strategies that allow young companies to endure and weather the storm of figuring out who they are whilst still launching. Because the opposite is also true. I'm sure you've seen where failure to launch because you're trying to get it just right. And
yeah, it's not neither or. It's somewhere you got to find the middle for you and figure out how it works for you. There is no perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of that dance between taking action
Mm-hmm.
and kind of going forward. So clearly, you've been through lots of companies. You've been on the ups and downs.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that either you made or that you see other business owners make?
Oh man, there's a book about it. Mine and many. That is the nature of the game is, that we are in. Rejection is the rule, not the exception, in terms of getting things right, getting to yes with investors, and making mistakes is also the rule of the game. Getting it right is not, right. So you're constantly in this phase of eating a shit sandwich, if you will, and pretending it's not. Um, to speak on the inventory one of the first big mistakes I ever made was we had a great PO, but it was not a big PO from a major department store in Canada, like the Neiman Marcus of Canada. And they had given us a projection on how much product they thought we would sell in the next 6 months. So my business partner, who was a CPA, and he said, we're going to order 25% of this projection. And I was like, no, we're going to order 110% of this projection because we're going to rock it, right? And I guess we were partners, but the decision went to me. And so I said, we're doing this. We did it. And then we launched, and a few weeks later, I get a phone call from a customer / investor. This was the first time he was trying the product. And he said, I see why you call this product naked. I said, why is that? He says, because it doesn't stay on when you wear it. And there was a product defect in my first manufacturing run that had caused two of the sizes, the largest and the extra largest, to not fit. They just shot off. I didn't have my ducks in a row on product testing and manufacturing and quality control, etc. And so I had this entire production run that it essentially constituted all our cash resources tied up in inventory. So there was no cash, there was just assets. And it was junk. It was garbage. It had to get essentially flushed. I ended up having to sell it off for like $2 a pair. Gosh knows where it went. I would have loved to have stumbled across it. Some guy came, picked up all the pallets, gave us a check, and left. That was it. Point is that I should have waded into that. I shouldn't have had those great big wide eyes as to what we were going to be, and I should have allowed space for failure and enough cash to recover from that failure. And it almost cost me the business.
How did you recover?
A little bit of luck, and I should say a little bit of grace. So we had no money. I was able to convince one of our shareholders to write me a $10,000 check. Essentially, that $10,000 check gave me enough money to fix the product issue, just fix the technical issue, not make another production run. I got in my car and I drove across the country and I visited every single one of our stores. And I apologized for the mistake I'd made in the inventory I'd sent them. And I asked them to buy another order from me that was fixed. And it had to be more than the previous order. Otherwise, it was just going to be a wash because I needed money to make the product. And I would say 70 or 80% of them gave me a second chance. And it was a lesson that one of my investors had said, which was, if you're honest and you're hardworking, you're allowed to screw up, once, and your investors will come back and they'll support you, or your partners will come back support you. But if you lie about something, if you try and hide it, if you're unethical, you will lose their trust forever. And that proved to be the case. It was just enough in terms of prepaid POs to go make another product run that got good product in the door, and we could enter the life cycle of sales.
And this is one of the things that I think a lot of business owners don't understand, is that growth takes cash, and you've got to balance those two out. Have you had to have issues where, as you continued to grow, there were times where cash got behind?
I I think I've lived 18 years where I've at least felt that cash was always behind. Even if there was $10 million in the bank, there's still this feeling, because at any time the winds can change. And we've seen this really. Try and answer this two ways. So there's this thing called, Mark Andreessen talks about it, the onion of risk, right? And as an entrepreneur, business owner, you're always trying to, instead of trying to add, looking at it like I'm adding things that make the business more valuable and profitable. I'm actually de-risking the business by removing barriers that could cause us to run into a problem later on. And so it's almost a defensive strategy in terms of growing your business. It's not look at how am I growing, it's how am I removing the risks that lead to growth. And where we saw a great bubble that to just recently burst was, so we've had the direct-to-consumer e-commerce world be on fire for the better part of the last decade, right? Like brands adopted, and venture capitalists adopted, a growth at all costs mentality. It was acceptable to not have profit as long as you were growing. And many of these fantastic, darling, unicorn direct-to-consumer brands who were getting upwards of the billion-dollar valuations. Allbirds is one. Away Luggage, I don't know where they are now with it, but Away Luggage was another one. Casper Mattresses. The list goes on and on and on. Venture capital's list would always fund as the growth with no profit. They would keep funding that growth. In other words, if it was costing you $100 to get a customer and you were losing money on that, or you were breaking even, the VC didn't care so long as you were getting the sale, right? Versus working harder and slower to get a profitable sale. It was get the sale at all costs. Well, after the first year of COVID, essentially the DTC market fell through. Cost of customer acquisition went through the roof. Cost of third-party logistics, shipping, receiving, etc., went through the roof. And many of these businesses with bloated growth business models fell apart, and are either in receivership or down 90+% on their previous valuation. And I've been there before myself, because I focused on growth over profitability.
Their business models did not fall apart. Their business models didn't work to begin with.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Well played, sir.
I think I think it's the only way that ever works is when you know your end game, and your end game is highly profitable. And
Mhm.
so I would say Amazon is an example of that, right? Um, it might be too early for Uber.
Mhm.
For years they were losing money. I don't even understand it. Like, I don't understand how they could continue to lose money when they literally don't own anything. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know where their money went. For most of the smaller businesses, yeah, if you don't have good cash flow and profit, one day the VC can turn their back, or one day. And I think what changed VC was interest rates skyrocketed.
Uh-huh.
So where they were getting money for nothing, now all of a sudden they had to pay, and all of a sudden everything shifted with that. And yeah, those
Yeah.
are all things that are expected. And the
And so, yeah,
question is,
you're bang on.
can you build it to work to begin with? Now, the other time is like when you have a new market and the first one to grab it all tends to win. I don't know if they're, but at the same point, even that's not true. Because if you
Yeah.
look at the browser market, right? I forget, what are we using? We're using Chrome, right? So Google today.
Yeah.
But before that was Netscape, and before that was something else.
They
And
were the 18th.
before,
Google
yeah,
was the
before
18th.
18th. So maybe slow and steady wins the game. I don't know.
There is this, like, the first, so you're talking about the first mover advantage, and then the
Yeah.
argument is you're in the blue ocean, or the white space, if you will, and you have all the access to customers and opportunity, but you also have all the costs of risks, because it's a frontier in which you are learning. So then the argument defaults to, or switches to, the second mover advantage, who gets to learn from all the mistakes of the first mover and then leapfrog them in the end. And I mean, there's truth in both of them, but ultimately it doesn't, there there's always going to be, yes, new markets emerge, and every single one of those markets is going to end up being a bubble that will burst on, like, look at AI. Like, so we're going to see, at the end of the day, tech is going to invest in, they're going to invest in, call it, let's say, 10 things. Okay, just say hypothetically. Well, those VCs know that probably 8 of those aren't going to work. They are playing a game of averages. Sorry, you're going to say something?
Yeah. How many of the 8 of those 10 business owners know that they're the one that's not going to work?
Well, they don't know, and nor should they, because they need. Well, I mean, that could be debated, but they need to have belief in what they're doing, and act on that belief intelligently. But that is the reality of these things, and we're always in that cycle of birth and death with industry, and with the businesses within those industries. That is the nature of this beast that we're playing in right now.
And I think what I meant by the question is, do they know the odds? Or because I think a lot of business owners don't realize that the odds are stacked against them,
Yeah.
and the percentages aren't great. That said, I think if you sit down and you reverse engineer a business and you use good common math sense, you can dramatically shift your numbers to your favor. And you can be one who actually does it. But part of that is also, you have to build a good foundation, and building foundations is boring. Everyone wants to build the sexy part. Nobody wants to build a foundation that will support whatever happens.
It's a really good point, Rocky. And I think about the classic Jim Collins, Good to Great. He's also got, no, the Flywheel's in Good to Great, I think. But either way, it doesn't matter. The point is that most of the CEOs that were in the great category, not the good category, were introverted number crunchers who didn't care about the limelight. They were ambitious. They were ambitious enough to grow incredible businesses, which means they were investing in those businesses, but they were doing so in a way that was not ego driven. It was common sense driven. And there's a danger that we face, that I'm guilty of, in terms of this. Back in the day, if you were the hotshot CEO, you had the book tour and the book deal, and you made the TV show appearances. And if you cut it according to Jim Collins, and you look at the numbers, those CEOs perform far worse, actually, despite their outsized influence, than some of the great introverts. And we live in this social media age where, again, there's, for many of us, there's this perception issue that factors into our decision makings for our business, that is ego driven, that is insecurity driven, that is based on how things are going to appear. And this goes to your point about, it is not sexy, it is not social media cool in most cases to just kind of be a quiet churner getting base hits all day, every day, you know, and just growing that thing slowly.
It's funny because when people come to me to help them and I ask them what their goals are, a lot of them have these outsized goals. And I'm like, do you have any idea what it takes to do what you just said? And do you have any idea what the chances of success are? And what it's going to cost you? And I don't think a lot of people really, entrepreneurs happen to be very positive people.
Yeah. Sunny
And
days, people. Yeah. Sunny dispositions usually.
yeah, there's a little downside to that. So you even had some fun during so you sold Naked, right?
Yeah,
Or
it was sold via a merger and an uplist onto the Nasdaq, in which I divested from there. Yes.
okay. And then what happened to the company?
So interestingly enough, I thought that was the end of the chapter. I even wrote the book, and as I'm a year later, so as I'm launching the book, they've actually told me that they've actually shut down Naked, the underwear business. But the company still is listed on the stock exchange. There was a few other brands in our holding group, and things were not very good. The company had a delisting notice from the Nasdaq, and they no longer met all the shareholder requirements. Things had really turned south for them. But then, out of the blue, it became a meme stock. For those who are familiar with this great saga of Wall Street bets versus Wall Street, GameStop, well, my little underwear company, Naked, was right in there, and it shot up to $600 million in valuation. And it was both inspiring to see this David and Goliath moment in the markets. It was heartbreaking to see and to know many people would be left holding the bag of this outsized valuation that the company was achieving. There was no way fundamentally it could sustain the value of which it had achieved, and so, but there was many people playing that game based on what they were learning and seeing on social media, and diving into this. And again, it was really cool to see the go after the Wall Street, because let's face it, Wall Street plays this game all day long, every day. Um, it's all a pump to Wall Street, as much as they like to pretend it's not. Uh, but it was surreal and sad to see it on the other side, and it was kind of like you were watching the dream of your company, but from afar, because it was no longer your company, and so it was a bit of a fever dream, if you will, to go through that. One that I'm still thinking about very very keenly today.
And it is, yeah, it's wild. And along the same side though, in business, sometimes in the beginning you get a whole bunch of orders.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is always, did you dry up the market?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you have consistency that this is just not like you hit? And a lot of this happens in a small business, right? They go out and they grab the first set of orders, and then they think everything's going to continue like this. And the same thing happened to Peloton, right? In the middle of the beginning of COVID, their sales shot up. They thought all of a sudden this was going to be reality every day. And no, it was a spike because of something that occurred, and then it comes back down to normal.
Yeah,
And
Mirror.
then the
Mirror was the
question
same.
is, yeah,
Lulu bought Mirror for
is
500 million, and then Mirror. I think that was the worst investment they ever made. I don't. I get what you're saying. Like, repeatability, and I find it interesting how even the smartest people in the room can miss on that, on something quite obvious like the Peloton one.
it it's positivity and it's emotion.
Yeah.
And that's just what happens. Um and believe it or not, Nike got hit with that too. Matter of fact, most major retailers, and I think it would have been middle of 22, all of a sudden demand just started dropping through the
Yeah.
floor. And again, that comes back to when inflation hit and everything else. And literally, people don't realize this, but there were they sell the containers on the ship as they're coming in. Like Nike's like, hey, I got 16 containers. You want them? I'll sell you a container for X. And
Mhm.
there are people who go out and buy these containers, right? They get whatever's coming in. They know they're paying 10 cents on the dollar. So they'll take it and they'll figure out how to move it. But it's amazing how, and that happened quickly. And so here you have some of the biggest, brightest companies. They do it. And, a small business guy's got the same problem.
Mhm.
And you just have, that's why you always have to be aware. And I like to have just as much leading indicators, because the most lagging indicator is cash, right? The leading indicator is, is the phone ringing, so to speak? Are people calling up, or are they looking at your ads? Is there any interest at the front end? And if you don't have measurements across that board, you'll get blindsided because you're so busy filling your orders that you don't realize, hey, the order stopped coming in 3 months ago.
That's true. That's a really good point, Rocky, and there's other ways that I also look at, so not lead indicators but lead measures, right? And so in it's what can I do now to prepare for the future, right? So a lead, this being a lead measure versus a lag measure, right? What happens as a result of that? So I look at continuous education as an entrepreneur. How can I get smarter and better at what it is that I'm doing, and also what it is that I might need to do, so that when and if the market shifts and changes, which it always does, if those orders dry up, it's okay because I took these lead measures and I prepared myself for this. And a great example of that, one of my longtime dear friends and business partners, is in the business where essentially they help companies go public and stay public. They do the accounting, but they sit on as the company's CFO, etc. And a great deal of what they do will be able to be 100% done by AI. And he's not delusional, right? Like going in and creating these filings for NASDAQ. Well, it's not
Mm.
rocket science, right? It's a seal, it's a designation seal, that and a process that puts the designation being the CPA and the process being we have to tick these boxes, right? A great deal of that can be done by AI almost already. Point is he's not sitting there saying, okay, I'm just going to pretend that's not happening. He's not sitting there licking his wounds and saying, or trying to just make as much cash as he can. He's saying, okay, this is going back 2 years before we're at whatever chat we are, and the fact that every single other major tech player has their own version of it. He's saying, how can I take a lead measure to prepare myself and my business for what's to come proactively today? And it's amazing because he's not going to be one of the ones that gets caught, or at least he gives himself a great chance once that business starts drying up. According to him, it's inevitable. And so that's another way of planning against worst case scenarios or just changes in the market.
And I call that risk management. What are the risks that are out there, and how do we have a backup or a pivot plan in place? Because as you've constantly mentioned today, you are constantly going to deal with that, right? Riding a business is like riding a roller coaster. You have to learn to scream on the way down too and enjoy it, which
That's a
is not
really good.
easy to do.
That's a really good point. Lots of people don't, right?
No.
I'm guilty of that.
So, what are you working on these days?
I'm bringing it back. I'm starting a company called Naked Revival. I I mean, I've done, I've written a few books, and I've my wife and I started a farm, and I've made a few movies, which I'm deeply passionate about. But there was unfinished business in the realm of great underwear, and so I've started a company called Naked Revival that is making just the literal best underwear in the world. I'm so proud of it. But I've tried to turn it into a lifestyle business that is focused on not just the underwear product, but also uh, actually all the products that would go into having a successful routine. morning routine, evening routine, the stuff that puts structure and positions you to have a great day, leading into the next one, starting it. And that's something that I took from my days as a runner, where, it was a routine was the thing that I knew I could rely on to have the best possible race I could have. And I've just found them to be a cornerstone as an entrepreneur that grounds me and centers me and focuses me so that I'm not feeling scattered. I'm not feeling underprepared. And I've created products that work for me to achieve certain things, like going on a podcast, like or going to speak, or preparing to do a board meeting, etc. I come up with these little routines, and there's little things I have for each of them. And I think people would like that. So that's my next trip into martyrdom of starting another business.
You've always got to get back up and try again. That is what it is, right? It is the up and down, and business owners know you got to just keep going, and that's life, and it's okay. I
Yeah,
mean, that's just the journey. So
it
be
is.
cool
Yeah.
with it
Enjoy it
and be resilient and
and
enjoy it.
I know that's practically like a trope at this point, but or maybe a trope, but like just such a cliche statement. But you got kids, Rocky?
I do.
Yeah,
Grown and launched.
grown and launched, right? Successfully.
Successfully
Yeah,
launched off the payroll.
yeah, right. They must be old. What is the average age now? Like 27 or 30 when they're still on the
No,
parents'
no,
payroll?
okay. Just like you sit down and you reverse engineer a business, you reverse engineer your kid's success. So my son graduated college at 20 and was out working, making more than enough money to support himself entirely. My daughter was involved a bit in the business, and so she's off. And they, because they had financial common sense and they had a financial start with the wisdom of knowing money, they were able to make wise decisions leading out and learning to take the time to think of, what do I really want from life and how am I going to do this and so forth. So we cover that all on my other podcast.
No, that's good, and I guess I could just uh, complete the thought I was thinking, which was just around enjoying it, and that comes back to your money as well, and knowing that you can be as smart as you is the smartest guy in the room with your top line and your bottom line and your profit, and still lose it all. And
Oh yeah.
I've seen that happen. And so it comes down to, also, there is this thing called life. We have to live it. And it's a gift to live it. And so we cannot forget that while we're doing our businesses and trying to have financial freedom and success is really the only sure thing is today. We don't get a week from now. It's okay to plan for that. We don't get 10 years from now. It's okay to plan for that. We get today.
Yeah. You just do your best and you keep going. And there are good days and bad days. And then there's tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
You keep showing up. If people would like to learn more about you, check out your books, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, joelprimus.com has my book Getting Naked, and it has some of my films on there. I don't do a ton of social media, but joelprimus.com or nakedrevival.com would be great places to check out.
And we will put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.